A dispute between those who operate Dothan's largest hospital and government leaders could plop in Montgomery. It wouldn't be the first time that lawmakers became involved in a selection process marred in controversy. News 4's Ken Curtis with the latest developments in this ongoing feud.
I think it's going to be something readdress.
State Senator Dottie Justine is talking about a conflict. The Houston County Healthcare Authority that operates Southeast Health and Houston County commissioners aren't exactly snuggly these days.
They were going to try to make an effort to have better lines of communication.
Clogged lines of communications amid allegations of name-calling and disrespect. Commissioner Ricky Herring claims he can prove that the authority's chairman made disparaging comments about a potential nominee to the authority. Herring claims a recording of his conversation with Chairman Chester Sowell proves Sowell disrespected Dr. Kelsey Steensland, whom Herring preferred to appoint. Problem is, a law limits his choices to only those nominated by the authority. Herring calls that a fox guarding the henhouse. This isn't the first time this controversy has reared its head. Frustrated a couple of years ago, the commission turned to legislators to rework the law. Lawmakers drafted a bill that passed the House, but with the belief differences would be resolved, the Senate never voted.
It appears now that that's not the case.
So Justine hints another bill that would strip authority from the authority is in the works. Chairman Sowell tells me the authority will abide by current law, and if the laws change, it will abide by those as well. In Dothan, Ken Curtis, your hometown news leader.
This weekend on the News 4 app and WTVY.com, see a document that reveals more about this dispute. That story publishes tomorrow morning at 8:30.